Good evening, I'm Sébastien Saint-François. Well, big surprise in court today for Top 5, a Toronto rapper who walked out a free man even though he was charged with first-degree murder. The rapper was set free after the Crown stayed the charge. Hassan Ali, that's his real name, was charged in the shooting death of a 20-year-old student back in 2021. Dale Manukduk has the details.
Free man. Hassan Ali walked out of a Toronto courtroom today celebrating.
I feel like Shohei Ohtani. I feel like a baseball player, superstar. You know what I mean?
The Toronto resident, also known as rapper Top 5, was arrested in 2021 in connection with the shooting death of 20-year-old Hashim Omar Hashi. Ali was originally facing 6 charges, including accessory after the fact to murder, but prosecutors later upgraded the charges to first-degree murder. Today, the Crown stayed those charges, and now Ali is walking away a free man.
I had no advance notice of what the Crown Attorney was going to do this morning. I found out almost at the same time as Mr. Ali did. But we were confident all along that this day would come.
You freed me! His lawyers say evidence used against him played a major role in his release after a judge decided it was inadmissible.
The way that Mr. Ali was charged in the first place was as a result of his lyrics. It was a result of the videos that he was putting out there. It's a result of his medium as a drill rap artist that attracted the attention of the police.
It's very much seen as being tied to social media. And I think that's the difference between drill and other forms of gangster rap. Is that
this expert testified during the case and says lyrics being used in court against drill rappers is becoming far too common.
that can also be very dangerous in terms of, you know, conviction and taking someone's livelihood away or take someone's freedom away.
Although Ali is walking away free today, a stayed charge means the Crown could revive the charges within 1 year.
What the Crown might be doing is seeing if within the next year other evidence surfaces that they might be able to rely on in place of what's now been tossed, and they just want to keep their options open.
Can I get a picture of you, Matt? It's going on my Instagram page.
Ali and his lawyer are aware the charges can be revived.
I got 21 questions.
After filming music videos while in prison, Ali says he's ready to get back to rapping.
I click the trigger on a stick like a high beam.
And according to Top 5, he's got another Toronto rapper to thank for that.
What's gonna happen for me?
For you.
I'm gonna go chill with my boy Drake all night, man. And shout out to my boy Drake, man. Shout out to my boy Drake, man. Took care of it.
Drake has not made any public statements about Top 5's case. Dale Manukduk, CBC News, Toronto.
To another story tonight, a female pedestrian is dead and a man is injured after a collision in Toronto's West End tonight. Police provided this update from the scene a short time ago.
It was reported that 2 vehicles were involved in a collision, and then one of the vehicles struck 2 pedestrians on the sidewalk, a male and a female. Officers responded, and CPR was given by bystanders and emergency personnel. The female pedestrian was unfortunately succumbed to her injuries and was pronounced deceased at the scene. The male pedestrian was transported to hospital with non-life-threatening injuries.
The collision happened in the area of Vanette Street and Pacific Avenue, south of Dundas Street West, shortly after 8 this evening. Police say speed and weather conditions appear to have contributed to the collision. Both drivers remained at the scene. A Toronto police officer is on trial today on an assault charge linked to the death of a 19-year-old man in Brampton. Calvin Au was off duty at the time when he met with Chad Facey to buy an Apple Watch, an exchange that ended in Facey's death. Ali Chiasson reports from the courthouse.
It was April 2021 when off-duty Toronto police officer Calvin Au met 19-year-old Chad Facey in a park to buy an Apple Watch off of him. The two made the deal over Kijiji. They met in that park, and Calvin Au was with another off-duty police officer at the time. It's alleged that after Au paid Facey the $400, he realized that the Apple Watch was fake. The Crown argues he tackled Facey to the ground, and that's how the teen sustained the eventually fatal brain bleed. Facey called for help and was driven home by 2 friends he was with at the time. Facey's friend Isaac McCormick testified that he called Facey during the deal after it seemed to be going long. Facey told him, "Come get me right now." When McCorma arrived, he testified that he saw two individuals over Facey, who was on the ground. He picked his friend up and took him to the car. Under cross-examination, defense attorney Peter Browdy raised doubts over whether Facey could communicate what happened. Quote, Mr. Facey doesn't say he was mistreated in any way. No, he couldn't. He couldn't breathe. He doesn't say some guys roughed me up. No, he couldn't explain. He couldn't catch his breath. But he still doesn't tell you what happened. Isaac McCorma says that's correct. Chad Facey's sister testified that when they arrived home, she ran outside and she saw her brother's eyes were rolling in the back of his head and he was shivering cold. Then the paramedics arrived. Quote, when they took him out of the car, he made a big screaming noise. And that's when I noticed a hematoma the size of a quarter in the middle of his forehead. Facey died in hospital that night. I have to point out that even in the agreed statement of facts, the Crown points out that the Crown is not in a position to allege that Facey's death was caused by the interaction with Au. And that's primarily why this is not a manslaughter trial, and Calvin Au has been charged with assault causing bodily harm, much to the devastation of Chad Facey's family, who will be in Brampton Court all week as this trial continues Tuesday. Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Brampton.
Former Headley singer Jacob Hogard has pleaded not guilty to sexual assault at his trial today. He was charged with one count of sexual assault in connection with an alleged incident that occurred in June 2016 in Kirkland Lake in Northern Ontario. Jury selection is expected to last 2 weeks. Premier Doug Ford is taking some heat for a comment he made at a news conference today. Ford was in Cobourg for a housing announcement and was asked about the impact it would have on the current waitlist for affordable housing. After highlighting some of the investments his government has made to combat homelessness, the Premier said this.
Do you know what the best way to get people be able to get out of the encampments, get out of homeless? Get an application and drop it off one of these companies and start working. You need to start working if you're healthy. Bottom line, if you're unhealthy, I'll take care of you the rest of my life. Your life will take care of you. But if you're healthy, get off your ASS and start working like everyone else is. Very simple.
Opposition leader Merritt Stiles is calling the comments quote-unquote heartless, saying it shows just how out of touch, yes, Ford is with the reality facing people in Ontario. At that same news conference, the Premier was asked about possible legislation that would prohibit adding bike lanes if a lane of traffic has to be cut. As you might remember, CBC was the first to report the details of this story last week, and Lorenda Ridicop has more.
Premier Doug Ford was asked why he wanted to get involved in what's a municipal issue, and he said he just wants to get traffic moving. No question, congestion has gotten worse, and a lot of people are frustrated. Some people are placing the blame on bike lanes. I asked the Premier, though, about the internal government documents that we obtained that talk about a potential risk with moving forward on this policy, that the move may not decrease congestion.
No, that's a bunch of hogwash. I know the city like the back of my hand. You go down on Hospital Row, University Avenue, paramedics are trying to get someone to the hospital as quickly as possible. They take out a lane of traffic, put bike lanes in there, it's cut down to one, it's jammed like crazy. Go on Bloor Street that they've disrupted all the businesses there. There's a petition just in Etobicoke for 50,000 people signing to get rid of these bike lanes. You might see 4 or 5 bikes as you see traffic lined up all the way down the road for kilometers and kilometers.
Now, that first stretch that he mentioned, University Avenue, that's also a busy lane for cyclists. And today, Toronto Mayor Olivia Chow once again mentioned that she can't imagine how much worse downtown traffic would be if busy bike lanes were removed. Previously, the strongest criticism that we've heard is about bike lanes that the Premier mentioned there on Bloor Street West in Etobicoke, and that's Ford's neck of the woods. Certainly, there is less bike traffic there versus downtown. Given the Premier's comments today, I asked his spokesperson whether it is considering getting rid of any of the current lanes, and I'm waiting for a response back on that.
That was CBC's Lorenda Ridicop. Lawyers representing healthcare advocates have launched a charter challenge against a controversial Ontario law. Bill 7 allows hospitals to send discharged patients into long-term care homes they didn't choose. And if a patient opts to stay in the hospital, they'll face hefty charges. Brittany Billette was in the courtroom today and has this report.
The Advocacy Centre for the Elderly and the Ontario Health Coalition argues that Bill 7 violates the Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
Just even today, emails are flooding in from people in this situation, and they're horrified.
Lawyers appeared in court today to challenge the constitutionality of the law, also known as the More Beds, Better Care Act. It passed in 2022 by the Ford government, and it allows hospitals to choose a nursing home for a patient who has been deemed by a doctor as requiring an alternate level of care. The patient doesn't have to consent, and if they choose to stay in hospital, they're charged $400 a day. Advocates argue the law unfairly targets seniors and takes away their freedom of choice and autonomy through coercion.
I think everyone understands how immoral it is to do this to people in their last weeks and months of their lives as they're dying.
Under the law, patients' health information can be shared with homes without their consent. They can also be sent to nursing homes up to 70 kilometers away from their preferred spot in Southern Ontario and up to 150 kilometers away in Northern Ontario. Patients who submitted affidavits say the law forced them to make decisions they would not have made otherwise.
So many families are in the same position that I'm in, and they're going through grief, shock, and being mad at this whole system, that they feeling like they had no control. They were just pushed through a system, and the hospitals were just happy to get rid of them.
Justice Robert Senta pushed back on some of the arguments made in court, saying that getting to choose from a list of alternative homes is constitutionally sound. At a news conference, Ford said Bill 7 makes sure that seniors are taken care of properly.
Hospital is not the place to drop off your mother or your father. They don't get the care, and they aren't equipped to take care of them like a long-term care home.
The Ontario government says that the bill is meant to free up hospital beds and alleviate crowding. It also argues that patients don't have a charter right to live in a hospital bed for free after they've been discharged. Arguments are expected to continue on Tuesday. Brittany Billette, CBC News, Toronto.
Average wait times on hold for a 911 operator in Toronto went down in the first half of this year. This drop coming after those wait times hit a 5-year high of nearly a minute in 2023. And while the time on hold is coming down, the manager of Toronto Police's Communications Centre says they still need more staff to meet the call volume.
Staffing is the greatest impact, and that is the heavy lifting is our members. Our members, I mean, we do the hiring, but the training and the mentorship and the investment engagement with our newest COs is all our current and more experienced COs. So it's really quite a feat.
As you might remember, a CBC Toronto investigation nearly 3 years ago revealed long wait times were more than just one-offs. Since then, the wait times continued to go up until this year. The industry standard is to answer 90% of 911 calls within 15 seconds. But since January of 2022, Toronto has only met that standard for 12 days. Welcome back. We're hearing tonight from former Canadian diplomat Michael Kovrig for the first time in an interview with Chief Correspondent Adrian Arsenault. He's sharing what it was like to be snatched from a street in Beijing and held in solitary confinement for 6 months. He was interrogated for hours every day and accused of being a spy. Kovrig spent, all told, 1,019 days in Chinese custody, along with fellow Canadian Michael Spavor, who was also detained. He says the whole ordeal was the most brutal, painful experience he's ever been through.
When you're detained, you're in a system that is trying to convince you you're a bad man, you're a prisoner, you're a hostage.
You're a spy.
Exactly.
Michael Kovrig is home and safe, but he knows he's not really free from that infuriating cloud of suspicion some see around him.
It hurt for a range of reasons. First of all, it's not true. I've never been a spy of any kind. I was a foreign service officer, a diplomat. The kind of work I do requires complete transparency and it requires trust.
Curiously, when Meng Wanzhou, the Huawei executive, was arrested in Vancouver at the behest of Washington, it was Kovrig people around the world turned to for analysis on what China might do next. Did it occur to you that they might grab some Canadians?
I analyzed it, I think, a little too rationally, thinking that there's no point in doing something to Canada because it's not Canada's decision ultimately.
He and his partner were having that very discussion after dinner in Beijing a few days after Meng's arrest, when he says masked men dragged him into a car.
They pulled my partner, who at the time was 6 months pregnant, away from me. We made eye contact for a split second, and I just tried to say, I don't know, be safe, take care of yourself. I will get out of this one day, but I don't know when I'll ever see you again.
His child was 2.5 years old when he finally saw her for the first time.
I'll never forget that sense of wonder, of everything being new and wonderful again, and pushing my daughter on a swing, and her saying to her mother, "Mommy, I'm so happy."
He too is finding happiness and freedom again, which gives him the space to consider a hard question. Could Canada have done more?
The Canadian government was not prepared. I think somewhat different approaches and a quicker understanding of the problems would have led to hopefully a faster resolution. But let's not pretend that it was easy.
Michael Kovrig has more to say about who's to blame, who to thank, and how he coped. He says he's on a bit of a gratitude tour because to be free is something he will never take for granted. Adrienne Arsenault, CBC News, Toronto.
On to sports now, where the NHL has a new broadcast partner. Today, the league held a press conference downtown to announce that it will be streaming games on Amazon Prime this season. And as Greg Ross explains, it's just another way the sports media landscape is changing.
It's on Monday. It's on Prime.
Prime Video will broadcast games from coast to coast in Canada on Monday nights during the NHL season.
It's going to be a blast.
NHL legend Mark Messier is among the on-air crew that Amazon Prime has hired for its coverage. All of them are expected to travel to every arena where games are being broadcast from. All part of a multi-million-dollar budget Prime is investing into its coverage.
Our goal is to make it a huge national event every Monday.
NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman says this will broaden the league's reach in Canada.
This is probably more accessible in terms of where our games are delivered than any other distribution mode that we have in Canada. No knock on those, but this is a real powerhouse.
Richard Powers, who is a marketing specialist at the U of T's Rotman School of Management, agrees.
Amazon has one of the largest following in terms of membership in the world, basically, but certainly in Canada and the United States.
And he says it likely has a bigger reach than many of the cable networks currently broadcasting hockey.
Some may not have, the TSN Plus package that their game is on, but now it's on Amazon Prime. They may not have Sportsnet or something on their mobile device, but now they do through their Amazon Prime.
The NHL is not the first major professional sport to broadcast some of its games on a streaming service. For the past couple of seasons, both the NFL and Major League Baseball have been streaming games. Rogers' contract for the national NHL broadcast rights is set to expire after next season. Amazon may not want to wait to extend its coverage of the NHL.
All the reports are that Rogers is losing millions of dollars on that deal that they signed with the NHL. So if they can offload some of those games at a profit, or at least to stem some of the losses, I think they'll be willing to do that as well.
Prime Video's first broadcast will be Monday, October 14th, in a game that will feature the Montreal Canadiens hosting the Pittsburgh Penguins. Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
And from hockey to basketball, because Vince Carter will become the first Raptors player in the team's 30-year history to have his number retired. Carter was the 1998-99 NBA Rookie of the Year and still holds the Raptors' single-season scoring record with 27.6 points per game in the 2000 to 2001 season. The now 47-year-old ranks fourth in the franchise's history in career scoring with 9,420 points. He will be inducted with the Hall of Fame's class of 2024 next month and will also have his number retired by the Brooklyn Nets in January. Here in Toronto, Carter and his jersey will be honored on November 2nd when the Raptors face the Sacramento Kings at Scotiabank Arena. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Time now for a look at your extended forecast with Colette Kennedy. And Colette, it was a bit of a wet start to the week.
Thank you. Yeah, we're really seeing that pattern has obviously changed from the dry conditions we had and then getting into a wet weekend, and yes, for part of today as well. And so that system's exiting, but another one is on the way. In terms of the highs today and daytime highs, very close to seasonal. They're just not above, as we were sort of spoiled last week. So seeing a lot of those readings, essentially from about 18 to 22 across the board. In terms of tonight, through these overnight hours and into tomorrow morning, likely just some isolated showers. It's certainly quite a bit of cloud cover. So morning commute in most cases is going to be relatively dry, but that afternoon commute, a little bit different story, as we'll see a more widespread rain moving in. And I'll tell you, as we get into the evening hours Tuesday and overnight into Wednesday morning, some areas where we'll have actually some embedded thunderstorms. And so locally, some heavier amounts certainly possible in here, but otherwise what we're kind of looking at is that range being in the 15 to 30 millimeters. Now, as we go towards Wednesday, yes, some sunny breaks developing, but still some instability, so we're still talking about a few isolated showers, but it does look like things will be getting better. Now, to pinpoint some of those accumulations a little bit better, it is hard for the models to handle, knowing exactly where we might see some thunderstorms, but kind of Toronto, or at least just east of in the GTA, and stretching northeast from there, maybe where some of the heavier amounts are, and you hear that rumble of thunder. Overnight temperatures, yes, those readings cooler in the nation's capital at 12, Toronto at 16, and Windsor around 14 or so. Now, I do want to talk about potential tropical cyclone 9, just because there's quite a bit of model agreement of this, not only in the next kind of less than 24 hours becoming a tropical storm, but being near hurricane strength, and then perhaps even being a major hurricane as it eventually, and this would be later in the week towards Thursday into Friday, moves towards the Florida Panhandle, and then could even get cut off here towards the mid-Atlantic states and the Tennessee Valley. So certainly something to be watching for. Could have an impact on our forecast next weekend. But for now, I'm keeping it out of the forecast, and obviously it's going to have a major impact on the southeastern U.S. So we'll have more on that. There you go with your forecast, 20 for Tuesday, Wednesday, 22. And then should things hold, then we break out on Thursday and have some decent days as we go into the weekend.
Thank you, Colette.